have just begun a new series called On Purpose. And we are talking about living intentionally between the resurrection that we just celebrated at Easter time and the second coming of Jesus. How can we live a life that pleases God and impacts those around us? We are in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and 5 in a series over the next number of weeks talking about this life, living a life that pleases God, living a life on purpose in light of the resurrection. If you've been tracking with us, last week Pastor Pat began our new series called On Purpose, and he talked about the hope of the resurrection. He talked about living life on earth and understanding some big words like justified and sanctified. Understanding we live because Jesus died for us, and we live free from sin because Jesus died for us. And then he talked about the fact that we are becoming more like Jesus, not becoming God, but becoming more like him. And that process is called sanctification. When we die as Christians, as Christ followers, we will spend eternity in heaven. Well, how should that change us? That's what we're talking about right now. How should it change us between the resurrection and spending eternity with Jesus? What's happening in the in-between parts? And today, I'm going to talk to you about 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 11 and 12. Just really a couple of small, short verses that really pack a powerful punch. But before I get to that section, I want to give you a little bit of context, things that are happening just before that, in the beginning of chapter 4, and then also in verses 9 and 10. I'm going to read those for you. Starting in verse 1, as for other matters, brothers and sisters, we instructed you how to live in order to please God, as in fact you are living. Now, we ask you and urge you in the Lord Jesus to do this more and more. Live more like Jesus more and more. For you know what instructions we gave you by the power of the Lord Jesus Christ. And so we're remembering, okay, how do we have to live? Oh yeah, live this way and live it more and more. And now I'm going to read verses 9 and 10 because they kind of build up and work into verses 11 and 12. It starts this way. Now, about your love for one another, we do not need to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love each other. It's like you already know this. You've been taught to love each other. And in fact, you do love all of God's family throughout Macedonia. Yet, we urge you, brothers and sisters, to do this, again, more and more. The Thessalonians are given instructions on how to live pleasing God, how to live on purpose, and how to do it more and more. That was referenced twice in those verses I just read. How to do the things that we're talking about more and more. How to love each other more and more. Culturally, it's noted that in the New Testament, Christians were marked by two things. People knew you were a Christian. It was like, oh yeah, that person's a Christian because of these two things. It was marked by two things: purity in their lives, and secondly, the love they practiced so fully. Without walking around with a sign that said, hey, I love Jesus, I'm a Christ follower, I'm a Christian. Christians back in New Testament times were marked by two things, these two things. And they were told to do them more and more. And so we're going to talk about living in the more and more. How does God want us to live, and how should we do that more and more? Purity in our lives, and loving people so purely and so fully. So then we get to verses 11 and 12. And basically, verses 11 and 12 are saying love, like that love that we were just talking about, how we were marked by love. That love acts like this. So let me read to you verses 11 and 12. And to make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respects of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anyone. Those are short verses, but what can we learn about living on purpose from those two verses? Well, first, it says this. We're just going to look at verse 11 for a second. We should live a quiet life, minding our own business while working with our hands. And why? So that we can win the respect of those who don't know Jesus yet and not be fully dependent on other people to support us. Well, let's break that down. Really, there's 5 points in this 2-verse passage. The first is this: you should have the ambition to live a quiet life. And typically, we do not hear messages like this. We hear things more like, reach for the stars, or chase after your dreams. Maybe you've heard someone say, aspire for greatness, or blaze a new trail, make a mark for yourself. This passage is actually completely opposite to that. This passage is saying and calling us to set our ambitions on a quiet life. Or another way to put it, which kind of sounds really odd, is make it your ambition to be unambitious, which almost sounds like an oxymoron. But set your aspirations on humility. Why is this a call to Christians, and especially in Thessalonica? And how does this apply to us today? Because in our world, it kind of seems to be a prize-worthy statement to say, I'm too busy. I have too much on. I can't take anything else on. I'm so busy. I've just got all of these things I'm doing. And it's almost like a badge of honor. This part of the verse seems very counter to that, doesn't it? Seems very countercultural. And let's be honest, lots of what Jesus calls us to is countercultural. It's not the way everyone else is going. It's different. Another perspective we could say is this notion of living an unambitious life or a quiet life really goes against the notion and the mindset of excitement and entertainment. Now, just follow me for a second, because I'm not saying excitement and entertainment is all bad, but I hope you can process this with me a little bit. We often buy into the idea that excitement and entertainment should be our thing. It should be like the ultimate thing. One of the commentaries I was reading in The Enduring Word said it this way: religion in that context, of the religion of entertainment, the religion of excitement, has a God. And the God is self, pleasing self. It has priests, and they are celebrities. It has prophets, and the prophets are perpetual entertainment. It has scriptures that are tabloids and social media. It has places of worship, this religion, and its places of worship are amusement parks and theaters and concert halls and sports arenas. Now, I'm not saying that entertainment is all bad, not at all. But I'm saying that our ambitions shouldn't be focused that way. We shouldn't be so religiously focused on ambition in that we need to make a mark for ourselves. We need to reach for the stars. We need to be the most famous, the most important. No, actually, living a life on purpose with Jesus is actually more about living a quiet life. That seems totally countercultural and kind of blows our minds, and maybe really kind of makes you say, I'm not going to listen anymore, Renee. I hope that you will. But it kind of makes us push back a bit, doesn't it? Living that way, not being totally influenced by the world in its excitement, in its world of entertainment, really is a core value of not only with the Wainfleet BIC Church, but we belong to a denomination called Be in Christ Church of Canada. And one of our core values, we have 10, but one is called living simply. It's defined this way: we value uncluttered lives, which frees us to love boldly, give generously, and serve joyfully. We value uncluttered lives. Kind of gets plucked right from that verse, this ambition to have a quiet life. And we have that for a reason, not just so we don't have to do anything. We want uncluttered and quiet lives so that we can love boldly, so we can give generously, and so we can serve joyfully. A quiet life gives us time and gives us space, not only to hear God, but it gives us time and space to hear the people around us. It gives us time and space to love people well, to serve people well, because we have capacity, because we have time. Well, the second part of that verse is kind of funny. It says, mind your own business. And I'll be honest, I did not think minding your own business was a spiritual message. A good message, yes, but I didn't ever see it as a spiritual message in this way. Certainly, I would have had it in the category with things like cleanliness is next to godliness, or money is the root of all evil, or God helps those who helps themselves. Those certainly are not spiritual messages. They have some truth to them, but they're not clearly straight biblical. They're just things people say, and we kind of assume they might be. But here we are clearly getting this call to mind our own business in this passage. What does that even mean? Well, it's a call to keep us from meddling in other people's business, not stirring up trouble, stirring up problems for other people. It's this quiet life. It's a peaceful life. It's not about stirring up problems. Now, let's be clear. It's different than our duty to help people or care for those in need. We're not saying mind your own business, stick to yourself, don't look at anyone else, don't ask if anyone else needs help. No. There's a subtle difference there. Because we are being called, remember, from verse 9 and 10, to love people more and more. So we're going to be in people's lives. We're going to be part of their business as they ask us to. But there is a difference. We want to be prayerfully in people's lives. We want to be physically and tangibly serving people boldly, right? But it's different when we are meddling. It's kind of like, sometimes kids, maybe just kids, hopefully not adults, can you, I want to pray for you more specifically. Can you give me some more details to this problem you're having with so-and-so? To me, that's becoming a little bit meddlesome. Or we give away specifics so that people can help. There's a fine line between minding our own business and becoming meddlesome. We want to be part of other people's lives. We're a community. God made us to be in relationship with one another, yes. But keeping a quiet life and our ambitions focus on a quiet life just means not meddling in troublesome and problematic ways. But it does mean being part of people's lives. So don't let that sort of get you off the hook. And the third part about verse 11 tells us to work with our hands. And in keeping with not meddling, one way we can do that is by keeping busy with our hands. Not so busy that we don't have time for other people, but busy that we are distracted in our own ways. This is interesting. In the city of Thessalonica, which is a Greek city, historically, we learn that Greek people despised manual labor. This was a cultural thing. They despised working with their hands. And in fact, they believed that manual labor was actually only an occupation fit for slaves. The Jewish Christians of the day were completely opposite. See, again, another countercultural message. The cultural message was, we don't do manual labor. We're not fit for us. We're above that. The countercultural message of Jewish Christians really believed that working with our hands was dignifying work. It was really important work. And in fact, another piece that I learned from the commentary Enduring Word said this, and I just loved it. Manual labor, while despised by the ancient Greek culture, they thought that it was that the better the person you were, the less work you had to do. But in contrast to that, God gave us a carpenter king, fishermen apostles, and tent-making missionaries. All of those things were part of working with our hands. God did not call us to be separated from work. He actually called us to work with our hands. And the king that he gave us, King Jesus, was a carpenter. He worked with his hands. So don't ever let anyone look down on that, like the culture did back then. Ephesians 4:28 says this, anyone who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with their hands, that they may have something to share with those in need. Working, yes, keeps us busy, but it also allows us to share with others. When we produce something or make something or grow something, what a beautiful blessing it is to be able to share those things with other people. And so it should be part of our ambitious, quiet life, both to mind our own business, but work hard with our hands. Well, verse 11 calls us to these things, but why? Why are these things important? When we said at the beginning, in light of the resurrection, which we just celebrate at Easter time, and the second coming, living in the middle of that, why are these things important? Why should that matter? Why was Paul bringing this up to the church in Thessalonians? Well, there's a so that. Verse 12 starts with so that. This is the why. So that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anyone. This is what verse 12 is telling us to do. Another version, the New King James, says this, so that you may walk properly towards those who are on the outside, and that you may lack nothing. I like that wording as well. Well, there is a reason God is calling us to live on purpose. He has a reason, of course he does. He's saying it impacts two things. One, it impacts our witness in the world. And two, it allows us to not be a burden on other people, but to actually be a blessing toward other people. So let's look at those 2 points from verse 12, excuse me. So the fourth point is, you may win respect of those who don't know Jesus yet. And I love actually the wording I just read to you, that you may walk properly towards those who do not have faith. This is why it's important to live on purpose. This is why it's important to live the quiet life, minding our own business and working with our hands. Why? Because then we will have the opportunity to walk toward people properly so they can see our faith in tangible ways. You know, I've often thought of the ability to impact people that we have. You know, whether it's in your everyday life, maybe you have a quiet ability, or maybe you're a little bit more like a Billy Graham or an Andy Stanley, who have this like really big platform to sort of share and witness to people. Or maybe that's not you, talking to hundreds of thousands of people. It certainly is not me. And maybe the thought of witnessing verbally just really makes you tremble. Verse 12 reminds us that we live a life on purpose, pleasing God, so that we can impact other people. Working at a quiet life, minding our own business, working with our hands can actually be a powerful way to win respect of those around us and to show people who don't know Jesus yet who Jesus is and what he's about by living like him or by becoming more like him. If you're a business owner, let's say, or you work in a business, think about your business practices. Think about the reputation you build when you're honest, when you're hardworking, when you're humble, when you're a person of integrity, when you're reliable, when you're trustworthy. Those aspects of your life, you don't walk around saying, hey, I'm, so-and-so and I'm trustworthy. No, you earn those things by working hard at being like Jesus. So that says a lot about you. But if you were the opposite, let's say the examples in your daily life of work are about cheating on hours that you claim you work, or cheating on tests if you're a student and other people see you. Maybe your reputation precedes you and it says, yeah, I lie to get what I think I deserve. Maybe other people see you treating customers or other coworkers with disrespect and rudeness. Maybe you're known in your business for talking behind people's backs. Your poor reputation precedes you either with customers, with people you work with coworkers. And that can say a lot about you. If you are desiring to witness to people without words, all of the things I just talked about really can count. The people around you see who you really are as they work with you day in and day out. They know if you're being honest. They know if you're being reliable. They know if you're being trustworthy. And as a Christ follower, the best way that we can impact people in this passage, it says by living this quiet life, by minding our own business, by working with our hands, because we want to be able to influence other people. We want to have this kind of influence. We want people to see Jesus in us and through us. The last part about verse 12 says this, so you won't be dependent on other people. And first, this doesn't mean, again, it doesn't mean we don't live in community and we don't help each other. Of course we do. We totally help each other. But it means we don't want to become a burden on other people so that they can't help others and we can't help other people. And I mean it like this. The wording in the King James maybe says it a little bit more easily to understand. It says that you lack nothing. So yes, we want to help other people, but we can't help other people if we haven't been doing our own part, right? There's nothing left to give. The difficulty came culturally and historically with the people in Thessalonica is because they misunderstood the doctrine around the return of Jesus. Remember how we said at the beginning, we're living in the light of resurrection and Jesus' return. We're living in this middle part. But there were people who misunderstood when Jesus was going to come. And so they thought, well, if Jesus is coming, we'll just stop working and live off everyone else until he gets here. Unfortunately, they had become a burden on other people who were caring for them when they were able-bodied. They were able-bodied and misinformed. And so Paul is saying to them, keep working until the Lord returns, because then you will have what you need and you will be able to serve other people who maybe aren't able. You will be able to be generous towards other people who maybe don't have need right now. The good news about all of these things is that we don't have to live only waiting for Jesus' return. See, they misunderstood. They thought, well, Jesus isn't here now. There's nothing to look forward to. But we know that while we wait in this waiting time between Jesus' resurrection and him returning, Jesus has brought his kingdom to earth. And Jesus' return in the future is absolute. But his kingdom is here now, and we can be part of that. And so living a life that pleases God is being part of Jesus' kingdom now. Living this life on purpose is possible only because of Jesus' resurrection, only because he gave us power to do that in his resurrection. Ephesians chapter 1, verses 19 and 20 talk about this power, and I want to read that to you. It says this, I also pray that you will understand the incredible greatness of God's power for us who believe in him. This is the same mighty power that raised Christ from the dead and seated him in the place of honor at God's right hand in the heavenly realms. That same power that raised Jesus from the dead gives us the ability to live in this very countercultural way. It gives us the ability to live a quiet, humble life, to keep to our own business and not meddle in other people's. It gives us the power to work with our hands. It gives us the power to impact and show people who Jesus is just by how we live. I hope that one of these things really is sort of ringing in your mind. It just keeps coming back as I say these words over and over again. It gives you the power to live on purpose and with purpose. It gives you the power to positively influence people around you. And so I want you to think about one of these questions today. How might God be calling you to step toward this life on purpose? And certainly there's 5 different ways. Don't think about all of them at once. Maybe there's one thing that's kind of, this is what's sort of ringing in my mind right now. Maybe it's God calling you to shift your goals and ambitions. Maybe he's calling you to shift towards a more humble life. Not about making a name for yourself, not about sort of being the shining, rising star, but that God is calling you to live a quiet, humble life. Maybe he's calling you to sort of keep your eyes focused on him and not focus on other people's business, not focused on what everyone else is doing, but sort of keeping your eyes focused in the right way towards Jesus. Maybe God is calling you to work with your hands. He's saying, you know what, I'm giving you the power to work. And with that work, you are going to be able to care for people, but also you're going to be able to impact people with your personality, with the ways you are living out who I am, who Jesus is in your workplace. Maybe you're feeling a challenge. You're like, you know what? I have been living out in a workplace really poorly. And I need to change people's perception of me by starting to be honest, by starting to be trustworthy, starting to be reliable, starting to show commitment to coworkers, to customers. Maybe God is challenging you today to say, you know what, you need to step toward living a life of purpose by changing some behaviors that you have at work so that you will be able to impact people. You will be able to win the respect of people around you. What a beautiful testimony that would be. And lastly, maybe you just need to step into action. You need to step into something, beginning to contribute in a new way, instead of just sort of sitting back and waiting for someone else or everyone else to do something. But maybe God's calling you into action. What might that look like for you today? I pray that you will sense God showing you an area in your life from these verses 11 and 12, calling you to step toward this purposeful life, living life on purpose. And God is going to give you the power to do that. The power that raised him from the dead, the power of the resurrection, lives inside of you as a Christ follower. God will give you the power to live with this purpose. And I hope that you will be called to step toward that today. Let me pray for you. God, these short 2 verses really are so powerful, but they're hard. They're countercultural. To desire to live an ambitious life looks really different in the world than it does in this passage. God, you're calling us to a quiet life, to a humble life of minding our own business, of working with our hands, but you do that for a reason. And it's so that we will be able to be powerful influencers to the people around us. And so God, I pray that you would help us to do that. Help us to maybe give up goals and ambitions of selfishness, of entertainment and excitement nonstop. Help us to learn how to shift and look toward you, so that we will be able to be influencers, so that our purposeful life will show others who you are. God, we want to be people who are generous with our time, with our talents, with our finances. And so, Lord, help us to be able to work so that we can joyfully and boldly love people with generosity, that we can serve people with joyfulness. God, we cannot do these things without you. We can for a little while, but then we run out of steam. But God, with you and with the power that raised you from the dead, we have this ability. And so, God, today we are asking you to give us this power, show us this power, so that we can live boldly, faithfully, a life on purpose, impacting other people for you. God, thank you for including us, for allowing us to partner with you to influence the world. We pray all these things in your name. Amen.